Today, the founder and CEO of Telegram is arrested in France. President Macron claims that there's no political motive behind the arrest, but is there more to the story? Kamala Harris's campaign tries to rewrite her policy positions as tough on immigration in a new ad featuring Donald Trump's big bad wall. And a new video reveals the January 5th pipe bomb suspect was directly across the street from Capitol Police squad car while planting the bomb. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to The Chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, August 26th. The plot twists just keep coming in the lead up to the November election as Donald Trump received an endorsement from former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard earlier today.
Truth is, as we head towards our decision as a country in November, the same cannot be said about Kamala Harris. In fact, the opposite is true, and we're living through this reality today as this administration has us facing multiple wars on multiple fronts in regions around the world and closer to the brink of nuclear war than we ever have been before. This is one of the main reasons why I'm committed to doing all that I can to send President Trump back to the White House where he can once again serve us as our commander-in-chief.
Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief for Blaze News, and Harmeet Dhillon, Center for American Liberty founder and CEO and civil rights attorney. So Harmeet, thanks for joining us today. But when we look at this, Tulsi Gabbard has previously endorsed candidates like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden for president. So why do you think that her stance has shifted so much this cycle?
Well, I'm not sure that her stance has shifted so much as the Democratic Party has shifted so far to the left that many, many Democrats no longer recognize their party. Today's Democratic Party is the party of big pharma, the party of warmongering, the party of destroying our civil rights, the party of inequality, and the party that has distanced itself from all of the so-called liberal values that made the party what it is before the recent takeover of it. And so you're seeing patriotic Americans who happen to be Democrats or recent Democrats step forward and endorse President Trump because they realize what's at stake for our country here. And it isn't just one political party or set of policies or another, but it's an existential divide over what this country means and whether we're going to adhere to those constitutional norms or not. And I think I consider Tulsi a friend, and I've supported her work, and I'm not surprised that she's taken this position because she came out swinging against Kamala Harris and her excesses and violations of civil rights that those of us here in California know very well during the debates in 2020. And it was incredible how she filleted Kamala Harris, and we need that energy here right now to remind the American people of what's at stake in this election.
Sadly, today is the 3-year anniversary of the deaths of 13 American service members who died during the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. And Donald Trump joined the families of the fallen service members in Arlington National Cemetery. Now, Harmeet, we compare and contrast what Donald Trump did, and then Joe Biden spent his day at the beach house, and Kamala Harris was nowhere to be found. So what does it say that we see Donald Trump paying the respects to the fallen, and Biden and Harris are nowhere to be found?
Well, what it says is we don't really have a president in the White House right now, and we haven't for some time. I would argue we haven't had one the entirety of the so-called Joe Biden presidency. We don't even have a vice president because she's out there campaigning in her anointed role as the leader of the Democratic Party and the nominee of the party. But what it says more deeply is today's Democratic Party views life as cheap. The lives of the American service members who gave their lives in vain, really, for the huge policy mistake made by Joe Biden and throwing their lives away and the lives of many people by hastily beating a cowardly retreat out of Afghanistan. And he can't even bring himself to come and comfort and hold the hands of or even show respect or lay a wreath. This is part and parcel. It's not out of character for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Democrats in general today. They view the bodies of our youth who volunteer for our military services as simply cannon fodder for policy aims and not as human beings as who have sacrificed for our country and our safety. So we can only expect more of this under a Kamala Harris, who is the border czar, hasn't even visited the border, and is completely distanced from the duties of her job.
Harmeet, we have the Trump and Harris campaigns clashing over this debate, the ABC debate. On the one side, you have Harris claiming, we need to change the rules. There's a live mic, and the Trump campaign right now saying, no, we're not going to change the rules. We already agreed under Biden not to do that. What's your thought on this? Is this a big deal? Like, where's this going? What's going on here?
I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a, sort of typical chest beating skirmish you see in campaigns. But what it does tell you very clearly is that Kamala Harris intends to rely on gimmicks to get herself past this debate. I'm sure it terrifies her to sit down with or stand up with and have to debate the master of debating in this particular format, Donald Trump. So she's trying to grasp for every gimmick she can find. And in this case, what she wants with the open mic is to be able to do her tired girl boss trope to interrupt him when he, makes a comment about her and say, I'm speaking, it's my turn, I'm claiming my time, whatever platitude you want to plug in there. That's a gimmick she's relying on. She's also relying on having to need notes, be seated. Who knows? She might want to have, I think Megyn Kelly said, her comfort governor, Tim Walz, around to help her out and hold her hand while she's doing this debate. No, she's a big girl, and the president of the United States is expected to stand toe-to-toe with the worst despots, demagogues, dictators, and evil people in the world. And they have to be able to do that without crutches, without gimmicks, without props, and without calling a lifeline. So Kamala Harris, woman up, stand up there and do your job, and let's see if you can go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump.
Harmeet, my last question for you is something related internationally, because we saw over the weekend Telegram founder and CEO Pavel Durov was reportedly arrested in France, and the French president said that there was no political motive behind the arrest. But earlier today, we saw that he was charged with 12 criminal counts, including complicity to possessing pornographic images of minors, 5 counts based around narcotic substances and money laundering. So what do you make of these charges, and what is going on right now in France?
Well, what's going on in France is really what's going on in Europe and what's going on in many parts of the world. And that is, there are people in the world, particularly thin-skinned foreign leaders and their ilk and the bureaucrats who thrive under them, who believe that encryption, private communications, privacy, freedom of speech, these are all verboten. These individual rights that we take for granted here in the United States, that are protected by our laws, that are cherished by our citizenry, are simply not the norm in most of the world. And that includes our cuddly-looking playground of Europe, where Americans like to go spend money and vacation and eat their baguettes. It's evil. And make no mistake, they're coming after X, they're coming after Rumble, they're coming after the Tucker Carlsons of the world, they're coming after every free speech-loving person who decides they'd like to communicate privately. We have in America something called the Communications Decency Act, Section 230. I have some problems with parts of that law, but the critical part of that law that we have in America is that a platform is not legally responsible for the communications that people who are on that platform make with one another. But what France has done is made the founder of that platform liable for all of the content of all of the users on that platform. So if 2 people communicate bad things on that platform, they're holding the Telegram founder liable for that. That's chilling and outrageous. We should all have the right to communicate freely and privately, free from prying government eyes. Those of us in America know very well that government spying that has occurred on our soil by the CIA and the FBI has damaged and undermined our civil rights. And we need to understand this is an existential crisis for free speech in the world and free speech in America, because if this is allowed to persist and we just wink and let the French and the other bureaucrats there in Europe do whatever they want, They will be arresting the heads of all of the platforms that we hold dear. They'll be arresting us for being on those platforms. So don't spend money in France, boycott them, and America needs to seriously consider the extent to which we continue propping up these speech-suppressing regimes in Europe.
Yeah, and it's all spiraling so quickly. Harmeet, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
David Limbaugh will be on to tell us what Rush would think of the current political climate change up next. All right, well, it's college football season, and I'm ready for some beverages and some games. So, Peterson, they sent us some from Flying Ace Whiskey, and I've tried it, and I really like it. I know they sent you some, too.
Yeah, Flying Aces. I mean, I had some this weekend as well.
I'm gonna use it for all my college football, all my appetizers, everything that I have going this week. But when you look at Flying Ace whiskeys from Craft Co., these spirits are inspired by generations of American aviators, and they're proudly crafted in the United States. And it's not just about great whiskey; they're also dedicated to giving back. So through their partnerships with Folds of Honor, Flying Ace also helps provide scholarships for the families of the fallen or disabled American service members. So it's a way of helping these families begin to chart their own course after experiencing such great sacrifice. Flying Ace whiskeys are American proud because they're American made, and they're American proud because they're helping to support our heroes and their families. So don't wait around. Today's the day to get your own and see what the hype is all about. Buy it online at flyingacespirits.com. Use the code America to get free shipping. That's flyingacespirits.com. Code America for free shipping. Kamala Harris's campaign recently released an ad that tries to portray Harris as tough on border security, and it even includes multiple shots of Trump's border wall, which Harris heavily criticized over the last few years.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here to discuss is David Limbaugh, best-selling author, columnist, and lawyer. David, thanks so much for joining us here today. So why is it that all of the policies that we've seen from Kamala Harris are basically the ones that she's stealing from Donald Trump? Do you think that the American people are going to see through this and see Kamala for who she is?
Well, this question transcends all the issues, not just the border. Kamala is hiding from her record because she's been the incumbent with Joe Biden. It's a miserable record. So they now are pretending that Trump was the incumbent for all practical purposes and trashing the record and saying they're promising hope and change. It is the most ridiculous Orwellian scenario I think we've ever seen.
David, speaking of Orwellian scenarios, can you talk to us a little bit about the media's push for censorship right now? I mean, I think we're seeing something that certainly seems to me to be unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. What do you think about what's going on?
I posted a long tweet today about this. I think in addition to what we face if the Democrats win in the November election, are not just the horrendous substantive policies they will enact, but their authoritarian impulses against speech, against all kinds of free expression will be implemented if they can get away with it. The essence of my tweet was, it's scary to me because Democrats and leftists, progressives, leftists, they're all together now, have this mindset that anything they don't agree with is misinformation. And so they think they're justified in suppressing our speech, both because it is damaging to the republic. I don't know how they rationalize this thing and deceive themselves, and might lead to violence. Of course, we see their speech is what potentially leads to violence, actually leads to violence. They're the ones who suppress the truth. They're the ones who suppress their low information voters from hearing the facts. The people who who have nothing to hide want truth to come out as a disinfectant. And they want the remedy for bad speech is more speech. So you can bring the truth out into the open. And that's what the Republicans stand for. That's what Trump stands for. That's what MAGA stands for. And Democrats, horrifyingly, are opposing it. And we really have to be scared. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in Canada. They're criminalizing thought and prayer in the United States in some cases. And it's getting serious, and we can't poo-poo it. We're on the verge of a totalitarian state. I don't care if people think I'm exaggerating. It's obvious. It's plain as day.
Yeah, it's very obvious. And you spoke about your tweets. You were tweeting all last week during the DNC. We saw a great RNC and people coming together in the theatrics that was out there for the RNC. How do you compare and contrast that with what you saw last week in Chicago?
Well, real versus fake, real versus surreality. I mean, what we saw at the Republican convention was so gratifying and uplifting on the heels of Trump escaping through God's grace an assassination attempt, and then standing up spontaneously and yelling "fight" 3 times, and all that positivity that occurred during our convention, and all that unity, and all the talk was pro-policy. It wasn't demonizing Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. As you know, Biden's name was only mentioned twice. This was all about policy and what we could promise to bring to the United States, basically restoring what we had during Trump's first 3 years before COVID. Contrast with the Democrats, who have no policies to offer. Their record is objectively bad across the board on border, the economy, the military in decline, and social issues and the rest of it, men and female sports. It's all terrible, and yet their whole MO now is to present themselves as the repositors of joy, and it's all wonderful. But they can say all that on the one hand. They can create this illusion, this mirage, that they're joyful and that Kamala isn't inherently unpopular, which she has been all through, and pretend she's somebody she isn't, never having been exposed to the population, the voters, keeping her hidden in the basement like they did Biden for the whole 4 years, and then having all their convention speakers talk about joy while at the same time trashing, demonizing, vilifying Trump and the rest of MAGA, and talking about how terrible we all are, and then lecturing us for being divisive and hateful. Again, everything is surreal. Everything is Orwellian. Pray that the public will be exposed to who Trump and Vance really are through such media as Elon Musk, where it's not really just an interview. It's a conversation. You see, Trump is not threatening. He's not the ogre they depict him as. Same as J.D. Vance, who's been incredible on the stump and in press conferences. Make themselves available like they have been and contrast that. Then flush the Harris and the Democrats out by pressuring the media to force them out in the open, do the debates, then play her clips endlessly showing how ridiculously contradictory she is and what a failed record she has.
David, I am a proud Rush baby, and I listen to him all the time, and I miss him now in moments like these. So with Rush as your brother, what would he have said about the DNC that just went on last week?
I think he'd say exactly what I'm saying, but more eloquent, more original, less predictably, and with more cheer. You know, I'm a funny guy when it doesn't come to politics. When it comes to politics, he used to make fun of me because I'm so serious. David, you're just like our dad. You're just always too serious. Yeah, I admit it. Guilty. Rush had a unique way of injecting humor into some of the most horrendous things. I'll never get over how good he was at that. And I think he would say that he predicted that if the Dems ever got in power in 2020, there'd be no limit to their extremism. And I, not that this is about me, wrote a book, Guilty by Reason of Insanity, I think in 2019, predicting the horrendous things they would do. Not that I'm a prophet or prescient like he was, but it was so obvious. They've told us who they are. And I also think, since you asked, Rush would say, and people ask me all the time, while it's not time to panic now, it sure as hell will be if these Marxists win or steal the 2024 election. And I think he'd remind people, this is important, he'd remind people of the Limbaugh theorem. I don't know if you remember that as an avid listener of Rush, but he used to talk about how Obama, when running for re-election, would act like he was running against somebody else's record so that he could get away from his own terrible record and claim that he was wonderful and he was promising hope and change. I thought I was I thought I was getting some kind of delusion when I saw Michelle and Barack talk about how terrible the current record was, and they were promising hope and change from that record. So they're promising hope and change for themselves. But Rush and I were raised as patriots, raised to love America as founded, to revere the Constitution and the order to liberty it guarantees. And we were told we should fight to the death to preserve America as the greatest nation in the history of the world. And that's what he would be doing. He would be fighting like he always was. He was the tip of the spear. He took horrendous abuse for 30 years before any of the rest of us got involved in this. I mean, I was involved, I'm an old guy too, but nothing like he was, and took the abuse, being called racist and all the rest of it. And because of that, he was a groundbreaker. He was a pioneer and opened the doors for all kinds of conservative hosts and moderators and commentators. So I think he would say, fight, just like Trump. Let's fight. Let's not give up. We're going to win this thing. And I really believe we are going to win it. Has not given up on America, as demonstrated by his deliverance of Donald Trump from that bullet and other reasons. There's too much of us, too much of a remnant in this country fighting for liberty, fighting for God-based values, biblical values, that I don't think God's going to give up on us, and we still have our day coming.
David, last question we have for today. I mean, the last 48 hours have been wild, and I'm still fielding, inquiries and people sending in opinion pieces to Blaze talking about RFK Jr. and what happened only a few days ago. Time moves so fast these days. I'm dying to know your take on what's going on with RFK Jr. and what it portends for the next few months.
It is so interesting. We had what seemed like unstoppable momentum after Trump was shot, and then our convention. And then the Democrats, through their Spielbergian Hollywood production of fantasy, got everybody, and then their media boosting it, got everybody on our side thinking, wow, man, this was an illusion ourselves. We aren't as popular as we thought we were. Then we're sitting there, what is going on? We know it's all fake, but it seems like it's taking effect. I knew eventually, by the way, that we would smoke Harris out of the basement. She and Biden campaigned from the basement precisely because they have records to hide from and to conceal. And eventually they can run, but they can't hide forever. And I knew we would smoke her out. But I think the Kennedy thing has accelerated the smoke out. And it has caused a resurgence of unity in the party. There are Kennedy people. I see this on Twitter. There's a lot of goodwill between Kennedy and MAGA. And that has caused a momentum shift, an actual reversal of the momentum back in our direction. It's all intangible. You can't prove it. It's all on the margins. But there's a feel out there. There's an attitude. We just needed to recapture the reality and a sense of confidence. And I think that gave us a boost. Maybe not have a substantive effect in votes more than a couple of percentage. But even if it has a slight benefit of that, it has a great benefit in turning this around psychologically. And that's really what we needed, to quit feeling deflated and to regain and recapture that spirit we had following the convention. I think it's very big. Not because not because I have any illusions about Kennedy's ideology, but he is a lover of liberty and free speech and all the rest of it. He's not a lover of liberty in the constitutional sense of that conservatives are, that MAGA is, but he is aware of what they've done to suppress speech, just like a lot of these high-profile Hollywood liberals, Bill Maher. They're still liberals, but even Jon Stewart is making fun of Democrats for what they're doing. And so I think we're seeing the beginnings of a reversal, that even some of these crazy autocratic liberals, not crazy, but these autocratic liberals recognize that the left represents a danger to speech and to our constitutional liberties. And I think there's enough people in the United States that among the voting populace that are sufficient to give us victory in 2024. But if we continue the way the generations have been indoctrinated through the schools and Hollywood and the media and big tech, we could be in big trouble. We need to win this election in 24. I think the Kennedy thing, long answer, short answer, long, is that it's going to help us in the immediate and long run.
Well, David Limbaugh, thank you so much for fighting for freedom the way that you have and for joining us here today.
Thank you. See how serious I am? As soon as I get off, I'm going to start smiling.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Chris Bedford says the Harris campaign suffers from schizophrenia. He'll join us to explain next. How can we summarize last week's Democratic National Convention? Well, in his latest Beltway brief, Chris Bedford calls it a schizophrenic campaign that tries to message away its own policies. So he joins us now to explain some more. So, Chris, tell us, what is this schizophrenic campaign all about?
Well, you know what? One of the first things that I noticed, and we were talking about it at the desk, was how many American flags there were. Now, the Democrats love flags. They've got rainbow flags. They've got trans flags. They've got Ukrainian flags. They're all throughout the neighborhood I used to live in. What you don't see nearly as common anymore is just an open display of that American flag. And there were thousands that were distributed around the floor. To put that, to back that up a little bit, so it's not just some kind of random observation, Hillary Clinton's DNC ended up having to go down to the Philadelphia City Hall and take the flags off. The place was draped in them as just part of its decorations. And then the next day, it was bare. So we got a tip when I was back at the Daily Caller from a police officer, hey, the DNC took these because no one even brought one to put on the stage, and they realized that was an oversight. That muscular patriotism is what the New York Times is calling it, is something they've been really stressing. You see it in liberal op-eds. You see it in liberal papers. You saw it in the messaging, too. Another thing that they've really changed from previous campaigns is, remember in 2012 at the DNC when God was booed? There was a reference to putting God in the actual platform, and delegates on the floor were caught on tape loudly booing the suggestion. Now, you didn't see a lot of talk about Jesus Christ or God at the convention, but you saw a lot of talk about faith. And that's a more innocuous thing, but it was still kind of spread out throughout the convention. And then you also didn't really see the normal glass ceiling breaking speeches that you would normally associate with this thing. Kamala Harris isn't just representing women, because that's something that Hillary Clinton talked about. She spoke about it in her speech, but it wasn't a persistent message at all. They kind of pushed that feminism into the background. These are just some of the things that they've done to change the tone of the Democratic National Convention, to try and change the messaging. Not that it's really backed up at all to the policy.
They're booing God. It's only worse with the Philadelphia Eagles, Peterson. Thank you.
Yes, that's good. I mean, the Eagles are, in general, a bad thing, in my opinion, at all times and everywhere. Yeah. So also the border, I mean, there's so many things are schizophrenic, as you say. I mean, open borders are good. No, actually, I'm going to be tough on the border. I don't know how that's going to go over the voters, but what we do have on our side, the right side, right, all of a sudden is something that's open doors to RFK, Tulsi Gabbard types, right, coming in the last few days. And I see this rush of energy online. What do you make of this? I mean, it really is profoundly moving to many people what happened on Friday. And then there's other people who say, well, it's not really going to change anything.
Yeah, RFK's endorsement on Friday was not your normal one. I remember tuning into it. I was flying back from Dallas and thinking, well, this will just be like most other endorsements. It'll be there and it'll be gone and it won't really matter. But what it is it's more indicative of an actual shift in the way a lot of people are thinking, where they don't find the Democratic Party to be home for a lot of the ideas that they've had. You've seen this around the edges with those people who pretend to be brave on TV, but in reality just like to tinker around the edges where it's safe. People like Jon Stewart or Bill Maher have been talking about this. But then you see folks like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, who was effectively kicked out of the Democratic Party years before for daring to challenge some of its orthodoxies. He'd been a misfit in the Democrats for a long time. RFK is a little bit different. Well, he wasn't himself a Democrat. He'd kind of switched to being an independent. He'd been attacked by his family and all the usual. It's shocking to see his breakdown in public, on TV, or so much that CNN had to cut away from it, explaining just where the party had gone wrong. And though they have this messaging now, like we even saw pro-prosecution and pro-put people in prison messaging. We saw pro-border control messaging from Kamala. None of that stuff's mentioned. We even saw pro-George Washington from Bill Clinton, who granted wasn't exactly on the same timeline as everyone else there. That's not really selling with a generation, a younger generation, an online generation that follows the folks like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and aren't buying it.
With Harris and the messaging strategy that you're talking about, is it actually going to resonate with the key voters that she needs to pick up? Because I don't think that the Democrats are really going to pay attention. They're just going to punch the ticket one way or the other. But is it going to reach out to independents this way, Chris?
I think it softens her message with independents. I mean, to run a flagrantly left-wing campaign like she has been doing is unusual in general election politics. You don't see people tap to the left for the general, just like you don't see people tap to the right for the general on the Republican side. You want to kind of reach out. Her policies aren't really being listed. Her voters are basically getting a wink, wink, nod, nod that she'll say things like, I am pro-fracking, but they know she's not. There's backroom deals that are being made. All she has to say is, I'm a good progressive. And those hardcore folks will come out and they know that that's the way she'll govern. When this kind of messaging now, pro-freedom, pro-faith, pro-America, pro-George Washington, that makes all of that very sanitary to the left wing, to more independent voters. The kind of voters that Bill Clinton won when he won the election 2 terms in a row, that Barack Obama reached out to. People who don't share those radical ideas, but maybe want to take part of an aspirational message, and who maybe are tired of someone like Donald Trump, who, it's funny, if you look at Donald Trump's actual policies, if you take out the tweets, how incredibly similar they are to Bill Clinton's policies in the 1990s. Well, that shows you how far the Democratic Party has actually come outside of messaging.
Bedford, I'm just glad that they were just burning the flags outside of the DNC, not inside. They actually liked the flags this time around. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be back.
Steve Baker will have new revelations about the January 6th pipe bomb and Secret Service protection of Donald Trump. You don't want to miss it. In a new Blaze News exclusive, Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman revealed that the suspect in the January 6th pipe bomb case was across the street from a Capitol Police squad car while walking to drop the bomb off the night before. And Steve Baker joins us now. So take us through this new video that you have, Steve.
Well, this is a little bit more confusing than some of the other things that we presented, because actually, for the first time, we got confused. There's no other way to say it, because there's so many moving parts to this story. The first thing is that we got new video from a new angle of the actual FBI-identified alleged pipe bomber. That's the one with the hoodie on, kind of small frame person, maybe a male, maybe a female. We still don't know. We don't know the race of the individual. But there was other video that came from the Capitol Hill Club that has been out there for over 3 years. And we could see that. But now we had a much broader cross-section, a wider frame from a more distant camera with really good resolution. We could see the bomber moving into the area, passing in front of the Capitol Hill Club, just as a Capitol Police SUV was pulling past. And the interesting thing and the weird thing that happened first was we got a much better look at the alleged bomber waving at the SUV as they passed and then pointing at them as almost like recognition or, hey, how's it going? Like somebody you pass going to and from work or whatever the case may be. The bottom line is that we had not seen that quality of that before, and that really caught our interest, so we kept watching. And then that SUV circled the block. So we know that because we were able to follow from other cameras that SUV circle the block and then come back up the street that we're looking down here in this particular video image. As the alleged pipe bomber goes down that sidewalk and then eventually reaches the alleyway in between the Capitol Hill Club and the Republican National Committee headquarters. And then as the other vehicle, and you can see the light coming up now to the left of the screen there, and that bright light are the headlights and now the emergency lights of that same SUV that passed the alleged bomber just seconds earlier. Well, when that when that Capitol Police SUV gets there and pulls over right in front of the alleyway. The alleged bomber disappears into the alleyway, where eventually that bomb was discovered the next day. So this was a very coincidental situation that happened. So we kept watching, and as we watched, another Capitol Police vehicle coming from the other direction, actually a sedan this time, it pulls in and down the same road towards the other Capitol Police car, and then it does kind of like a Y maneuver and then parks behind the other car. Well, after that particular situation takes place, then we see the image of a similarly dressed person to the alleged bomber come out of the same. Now, see, there's the sedan right there. That's another Capitol Police car. And then a similarly attired person comes out of that alley. From the distance, from the low resolution, from the distance, and then also because of the bright lights from the two police cruisers, we were not able to absolutely 100% identify it, but we saw the white hoodie, white sweatshirt, the black pants. We saw the person come out of the same alleyway, cross the street, and then disappear into that bright light that you see. So, we had never seen these videos before. There weren't any other corroborating or accompanying videos. There's right across the street there on the side where that bright light is. That's the actual Library of Congress. Library of Congress has never released their videos. We've been asking for those videos for over a year. And you can see there with the circle, the person that is dressed similarly and from a distance looks exactly like the alleged bomber walking across the street. And so it looks like it disappears into the lights, and that this person was communicating or had a meeting for about 2.5 to 3 minutes with those officers. As it turns out, that's not what happened. When we released and published the story this morning, I got a message actually from a congressional investigator that said, "I don't think you got it right." He said, "But it took us over 6 months for us to demand the video from the Library of Congress that showed us," because he told me, "We assumed the same thing that you assumed." And he said, "I fought tooth and nail in believing that was, what you saw was exactly what I saw. Thought we had something big." And it's not that this whole story is not big, because the bigness of the story still remains the same. And not making excuses, not trying to rationalize anything else. We've corrected the mistake that we made in terms of whether that person was the bomber or whether that person identified and communicated with those law enforcement officers. But the bigger problem is that for 3.5 years, we've still been asking for these videos. And the entities, the FBI, the Capitol Police, that are holding a certain percentage of that video and still not releasing that to us and to the American public, makes that $500,000 bounty that the FBI has issued for if you bring them leads that lead to the arrest of that particular bomber, then you get $500,000. Well, it might as well be $5 million, because they have no intention of paying it anyway if they're not going to release the videos to the American public to get the leads, to get the tips that would be called in.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody could see it everywhere.
And let me say, what's ridiculous about this is that these other tapes are out there, right? There's footage out there that can't be released, but because certain people have the secret video that can't be released, right? They can tell us, no, actually, from this angle, you can see that such and such is true. Why are we doing this at all? It's crazy that we're going to, various people in Congress who have access to the videos, who are able to say, well, I saw this and we have this, but they can't release it. And then it drips out to various journalists who beg for it. This is an untenable situation. It's a ridiculous situation, and it needs to stop. All the video needs to come out. The fact that we're in this situation is simply because you have people who know what's there in this angle, but you have to sort of fish around, Congress to find the people who have seen it. And, this entire story just puts the exclamation point on it. We need all this stuff released ASAP.
Steve, yeah, we're up against a break, but thanks so much for joining us today. We always appreciate all of your updates.
Thanks, Jill.
Not even Harley-Davidson is immune to wokeness. Blaze Media's #1 Harley enthusiast will take us on a ride into the culture war just ahead. How did an American World War II era brand like Harley-Davidson turn woke? That's a question asked by head researcher for the Glenn Beck program, Jason Buttrill, in a recent piece for Blaze.com. He joins us now. So, Jason, has Harley-Davidson gone woke?
Oh, they've absolutely gone woke. I mean, the question now is, when Robbie Starbuck came out with this, I was floored. Absolutely floored. And my community, because I'm a biker myself. I'm in a motorcycle club.
Rides every day to work.
Go to all the rallies, go to all the meetings, everything. So I'm pretty in tune to how the community feels about this. And I think most of us were kind of just like floored. We're just like, this cannot be true. There's no way this can be true. And the more everything got out, we're like, yeah, it's pretty much what's happening. The CEO is an absolute nut job. I think that now as they've kind of backed off a little bit publicly from their DEI statement, I think the sentiment now is, I really don't think that's enough. I think that the entire Harley-Davidson community, which is probably 90% of the American biker community, is not going to be happy until they dump that CEO.
So the CEO is a nut. I mean, give us some examples of what they've done to become woke. I mean, what do we mean by that when we say Harley-Davidson's woke? And what are some examples of this guy saying crazy things?
I mean, saying they've gone woke is kind of an understatement. I mean, that is the worst of the worst. Everything from, mandating that employees go to the training to show how, dangerously white they are. All the LGBTQ stuff, advocacy. The CEO talked about how he wanted to be, what was it? I can't remember the direct quote, but basically the Taliban. They said the Taliban of this movement. And we're like, what are you? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. For one, bikers are, this is something that a lot of people don't understand about bikers. And I've always ridden motorcycles. I never really got into the biker community till maybe 5+ years ago, heavily. But COVID for one opened up a lot of eyes. And you wanted to get away from COVID. I remember here in Fort Worth, you wanted to feel like during the pandemic, the lockdown, if you wanted to feel normal, you went down to the stockyards. Because then people were like, screw that. We're doing our own thing. It was like a party out there every day. Coincidentally, no one really, there was no catastrophe in DFW. We all survived it, even though that happened.
I'm shocked.
But you go to Sturgis, they were still holding the Sturgis rallies. You go to any other biker community, they're like, no, screw it. This is about freedom. We're doing our thing. And by and large, veterans, we've jumped on Harley-Davidsons, not only as for the freedom aspect, but also because it's therapeutic. Harley-Davidsons have been very entwined, to that. And Harley-Davidson has been our story. And that right there is where I think they've when I say they, I mean this woke mind virus, and especially in corporate America, has really screwed the pooch here. I mean, big time. When you screw, that's what, and Matt, I know you know a lot about this, but when it's more than just going woke or people, these hypocrites trying to make money off of steering finances and ESG and DEI and all that stuff, which that's a big part of it. But they're screwing with the American story. And that's kind of what I was, writing about, and lately on, in my day job here, is that I do believe it's something more sinister than just going after finances and reorienting finances. They're trying to destroy American stories. Yeah. And right there, Harley-Davidson, that brand, it does not get any more American than that right there. Harley-Davidson, it's an imperfect motorcycle. It leaks oil like a son of a. It sounds weird.
You are fixing it a lot.
Yeah, I am.
A lot of your weekend plans are like, I'm fixing this.
Again, yeah, I know. But it's the American story. It's a part of our story. And for instance, a lot of people don't know the Harley-Davidson motorcycle, the engine noise on a Harley. It sounds odd, but it's so iconic that they actually applied for a patent for it. It's designed to sound that way. That's an American story you cannot change.
It's a lot easier to change your beverage with the Bud Light movement, right? That's a small purchase.
Yeah.
This is a very large purchase. Do you think that a lot of people in the Harley community, you said upwards of 90%, would look to change the bike that they own?
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw videos coming out of the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally this month, but the Harley-Davidson booth was near vacant, which says a lot. But it goes beyond more just not showing up and showing support like that. The people that I talked to just this weekend were like, how do I get out of my Harley and go into an Indian? I mean, again, another iconic motorcycle brand from 1901. Yeah. And Indian did it right. They came out right from the start and were like, "Oh, we're not about politics. It has nothing to do with us. We never got into D&I." But I mean, they were very strong on it. But I think that the cost of it will cause some people to to kind of take a step back. But I've never seen the community as of now be willing to go that direction. Yeah, they are.
And I mean, I guess I have one question about this, but I just want to highlight some of the things you've mentioned. I mean, Pride Month wasn't enough because February and March were also months of inclusion. Like they've just gone beyond the pale, as you were saying. Yeah. There's so many examples. A white male only woke diversity training program, like you were saying. This is crazy. People really need to wrap their mind around it. Okay, here's my question though, and my worry, and I think we all share this. The only time I've ever seen a real backsies was Tractor Supply recently. That's why it was so interesting, because they verbally in writing said we take back all this stuff. We're going to get rid of all of it. A lot of times companies will say, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of it, but they still kind of leave it there. Do you think that's happening now at Harley? Do we know enough about what's going on with Harley-Davidson? Are they really going to get rid of this?
Did you read that statement that Harley put out? It reeks of PR. Yeah. I mean, disgusting PR. Mm-hmm. They're trying to, in my opinion, they were trying to play both sides. Mm-hmm. I know that there was a big victory lap on just getting them to acknowledge it for one thing, because their strategy in the beginning was kind of similar to Bud Light in the beginning, which is like, let's just like do this, and close our eyes and pretend like nothing's happening. Yeah. That did not work. I think that what you said is the case, that this is not going to go out unless they tell that CEO to get the heck out. I think that will be, but until they do that, do not trust it. You cannot trust it.
The only thing that Jason Buttrill hates more than DEI is the Philadelphia Eagles. We were crapping on the fans earlier today, Jason.
Yeah, I think that you take the evilest of evil of everything bad in the world today, which I'm going to put DEI, ESG, all that stuff in, and you're getting close to the Philadelphia Eagles, but not quite there.
Yeah, I'd love to say differently to all the Eagles fans out there, but I happen to agree. They are godless, as you said earlier. Stu isn't around to correct us, and he is here somewhere. There are multiple Eagles fans here, but we've avoided them.
We hope that Stu Breer will never see this clip, but you know what? We'll be back tomorrow to be breaking down all of the news that will inevitably happen overnight.